Hi everybody, I hope you're doing well. So I wanted to give you some updates on what I've been working on in Game Maker Studio 2 when it comes to designing a Myst 3 or 4-esque engine. So if you're familiar with my point and click tutorial series, I have a series going over how you can create a perspective based point and click adventure game very similar to the original Myst games. If on my YouTube channel, so go check those out if you haven't seen them. In the last video in that series, I talked about how it's possible to create a 360 node system. So freeing yourself from a forced perspective and giving the player the ability to look around 360 spherical nodes. Well, that system has evolved quite a bit since I made that tutorial because I'm actually working on a new video game called The Fifth Space, which relies entirely on this new method. So I thought that I'd take the opportunity to showcase some of the things that I've been building inside this new project. Now, this is going to be a little bit more of a devlog. It's not a formal tutorial. I will be showing you the code. I will be showing you some of the methods that I'm using to achieve this, but it's not intended to be a formal tutorial. And the reason I'm not making a formal tutorial on that right now is because I intended the original point and click series to be very accessible to beginner and intermediate folks. This new method is quite advanced in comparison with those tutorials. Now, that being said, I am no coding guru. I'm not very good at coding, to be perfectly honest, which is why I'm using Game Maker Studio, because it just makes sense in my brain. But that being said, there were many nights of kicking myself and kicking my head against the keyboard trying to figure out how to accomplish that. So without further ado, I will just take you on a little walk through the game so far. And disclaimer here, what you're seeing now, there's going to be a lot that is placeholder. There are no sound effects. There's no music. There's a lot of placeholder animations and sprites, including the cursor itself is entirely placeholder. So please don't judge, the state that it's in right now. So here we can see we're looking around in a 360 node, right? And then I can tap on the ground. So if you can see that. And there will be a tapping animation for the cursor later on. But I wanted the ability to do some semblance of 360 audio. And in order to fake that, I'm essentially just, creating a sound effect if the player's view is down where the ground would be. Now, Myst 4 had the ability to have specific hotspots where they would play different audio, and you could basically tap on everything. And I'm not going to implement that, but I wanted to have some sort of, ability to kind of like interact with the environment to kind of create more of a tactility there. So I will be creating different spatialized audio for that. And you can see one of the improvements right off the bat is that the game remembers the direction that I'm facing when I go through one of these nodes. So we start in this intro area here. We can see this bush is chained to that fence. And let's just take a little walk forward here. Okay. And now if I move up to this door, you can see I've changed into perspective mode. Right? So similar to the original tutorial, I can change between perspective mode and 360 modes. And you'll notice that the cursor is changing. However, I have done away with having separate zone object types. Everything uses the same zone object. And if I go into debug mode here, you can actually see that the portals that I'm using to move between these spaces, these are the same. But if you look at the sprite that is being accessed there, when I move my cursor over, rather than defining separate cursors per zone type, I have one zone type, and the zone is what's feeding the cursor sprite to the cursor object. So therefore, when I go up to here, I can have a different cursor object on this, and I can just use the same portal objects. These portal objects are pointing me back towards node 4. In this case, I'm in node 5, and going over here would take me back to node 4. This one also takes me back to node 4, because there's really no reason for me to define separate right or left zones. I just need to indicate to the player visually that if they were to click right or left, right, I would go back right or left. And it's almost like I'm turning my head that way too, because as you can see, when I turn left, right now I'm looking left, because it's updating both the VX position and the VY position of the cursor, which is used to control the view perspective in 360 mode, and I can seamlessly transfer between these different modes. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to click on this door, and you can forgive this placeholder animation here as I transform the door into these various objects, which will lead me to the beginning of the fifth space portal, the first door here, right? And if I click here, I can now enter the portal. So we're going to go forward. Woo, through the tunnel. All right. And now we arrive here at the first area of the game. So what's interesting about this is if I was to click forward here, it's going to play a little video, right, of me going to the first node, right? The second node, should I say. Now, before, I had instructed you, if you remember the last tutorial, to create separate video objects. This is no longer the case. Each portal has a video defined, or can define a video. So if I hover, you can see that in the debug code there, pan object video underscore trans. If it has a video defined, and GameMaker Studio 2 can use MP4 videos, they can play it back, it will play that video. So essentially what's happening is when I click on a portal object, it takes me to that new node, and it automatically plays that video. Which is wonderful, right? Because that allows me to do things like this. I can look out the window, and it's going to play that video as if I'm looking out, you know, playing this sort of overview of the exterior space here, so we can sort of see where we are in this Art Nouveau style building. And then as we zoom back in, essentially what the portal is doing is it's teleporting me back to where I was. Boop, right where I was. And you can see when I hover over that, right, it's taking me to that video and to node 3, but we're in node 3, so it's just looping me back to where I was. Now here is what I would say the most major improvement over the previous system. So you see how we opened this door here? Well, the game will actually remember that that door is open. And if I go outside here, you can see that the door remains open. Now, this seems trivial. However, it's not a very trivial thing to do. What's happening now is essentially I have a reset background script that I will show you. And when you enter a room, two things happen. One, a script runs to give the variables to the different portal objects that are in this room. Two, it resets the background. And so what it's doing is it's accessing the panoramic background filter effect in the room, and it's substituting a new sprite. Now, people had been asking me, how do I do this? Well, the thing that was difficult about it is that it doesn't accept, or GameMaker doesn't accept, sprites to be fed directly into that panoramic background effects parameter. You have to convert the sprite to a texture by creating a surface and then applying the texture to that surface, right? And then once it's a texture, then you can define and augment the parameters of the FX layer. So now we have the ability to actually control these backgrounds. And I'm going to go downstairs for a moment into the basement. And you'll be able to see in a moment that I am flickering these car lights in real time. So I can actually look around while playing a sort of animation. So what's happening there? Well, it's very deceptive, but essentially all that's happening is I have the ability to have multiple states for each node. And what it's doing is it's running down a timer, and you can see that current state is just transitioning back and forth between state 1 and 0. And each time it's doing that, it's running reset background. So it's resetting the background to that flicker, right? So I'm going to go forward here. You can see this woman is surrounded by vehicles. And we have this sort of mirror object over here. It's sort of disguised in the fog. So I'm going to go back. And so you could probably take this even a step further and do like very basic animations within this 360 node system, which I'm excited about. So let's keep wandering here, and we see she's over here too, lying on this bed of moss in this kitchen area. Going to move forward, and we can go on this outer terrace in this sort of arcade. And if you're hearing birds, that's from my courtyard outside. That's not from the game. And we look out, and we look out on this view here, right, that we could see earlier. It's quite nice. And we have this mirror object, and I can click on this, and it's going to play a little animation. Now here's the other thing that the system can do, right? So this portal is still here, but now we have the ability to actually track which zones have been clicked on. So you can see that I can give this zone a label. It's called mirror. And now that I've clicked it, it's added it to my clicked zones array. And this is a great flag to be able to have, because it allows me to essentially run different effects depending on whether I've clicked on specific zones yet or not. So now it's essentially, what it's done is I've clicked on this node, it teleported me to the same area that I'm in, but it played the video transition. It updated the click zones to include the mirror, and then it updated the state of another node across the game. So we'll walk back. We'll walk back to the basement. And now if we go forward here, this mirror is open. And so I've created a new place I can go, which is over here. And this is the end of the prototype demo and my really shitty crack sprites that will show up, because eventually what you're meant to do is essentially break through this wall, and then that's how you get to the start of the game. This is just introducing the basic mechanics. I'll show off the pause menu. Again, a lot of this is placeholder, but I have this sort of pseudo 3D pause menu. And again, essentially what this is it's just a sprite that I've loaded on game start, and its state will change depending on if I open the log, the book will open, and the mouth will open in the options menu. Right now I do have like a very cursory options menu where I can change the volume of things, but yeah, that's pretty much it in terms of the prototype. Just to kind of showcase some of this stuff here, I'm going to go into the global controller, and you can see how I've set up the node system. And again, this plays directly off of the node system that you would have seen from the previous tutorials. But we still have our camera mode. we define areas and nodes. So there were two areas that you saw. There was area 0 and area 1. And each area has its own nodes. We have our click zones array. We have video playing. And then you see I instantiate these arrays here. And area 0, we can look at a very basic node setup. So a very basic node setup would be that this is area 0 node 1. Which room do you go to? Is it been visited or not? The state that it's currently in, and then the different states. So I can define different states here. And then each state, I have the panorama sprite to use for the background and the different portals. And this is where we feed the portals their information. So I say this is index 0. This is where what node you will go to if you click on it. This is where it should exist in 360 space. This is the video transition that will play, and this is the cursor sprite that you should use when you're hovering over it. Each room in each state can also define a separate soundscape, a different tap sound, and the camera mode, 0 being perspective, 1 being 360. And so if we go down here, we can see, that this is an example of having different states. So here, this is state 0 with the door closed, and it shows the closed sprite. And the door open one has it open, right? So it's the exact same thing. It's just swapping out that panorama sprite. And you'll notice that nodes also have the ability to run a script. So this will run the script door open. So how does that work? Well, in the step event, it takes the current area and node. It defines the current state. And then it accesses that struct to find what's within run script, and if it's a callable function or not, right? If there's a script there that matches it that can be run, it will run that script. And so I've sort of made the scripts very modular, and you can look at the door open script, and you can see that all it does is it takes the current nodes, and if the visited flag is true, is false, it moves it to true, and then it updates the state of node 1, right? So if the state of node 1 goes to 1, then if we go back to, our little thing here, right, now that this is state 1, it's going to show the door being open, right? But everything else in terms of its parameters are the same. So, it looks like a lot, but it's a very flexible system because I can create all these nodes on the fly. So what happens at room start? Well, at room start, if the game isn't paused, each time it's going to apply the node. And that's essentially, again, what feeds that portal information to the portals that are in the room. So I'm just reusing the same portal. Right, so this is the parent object. So it gets an index, it gets a zone ID. So this is the unique name that I can give it for identifying specific click events. It gets a location on screen, an exit node, an exit VX and VY, a video transition, which is the cutscene file. And it does the same thing that it does at the other tutorial, essentially. Draws it to the screen. And then if you click on it, if there's a video transition there, then it's going to start playing the video file. It's going to open that video file. It's going to, if it has a zone ID name, then it will store that zone ID within the global controller. And then it just goes to the exit node room, right? Easy as that. Then let's go back to the apply node script so I can just show you that real quick. So it takes the current area and node, and then if we're in camera mode 1, it resets the background, and then it basically loops through the portals with a for loop inside of the game, and then it gives those parameters to object zone pan parent, right, from the state data. So if I'm index 0, I'm going to get the exit node and video transition and X and Y coordinates and cursor sprite of index 0. Then for the reset background, this is the part that I really struggled with, but here it is. So this is what actually changes the background sprite for the 360. So it accesses this effect layer, because by default, if you use the panorama background effect layer here, you can specify a texture, which is just a sprite that has to be marked as being a texture. But it's very difficult, or I guess they don't make it very obvious as to how to actually access these textures within the code, or at least not to me. So how do I do this? Well, if we run the script, it takes the current area in node, it takes the current state, takes the panorama sprite, it makes this variable called pansprite, which is the current state's panorama sprite. Then it creates a surface. So we create a surface that's as big as the sprite. Then we set that target, we set the alpha, then we draw that sprite to the screen and reset it, reset the surface. Then we convert this into a texture by just creating a variable called text, which allows me to pass this into the struct. So text equals surface, get texture surf, and then the variable, the layer ID is my effect1, my panoramic layer, because that's where we're reading and writing to, I suppose. And then it basically takes this FX layer that we got, takes the layer, it gets the FX from that ID, it gets the parameters from that ID, and then it sets those parameters. So the specific parameter is called G panorama texture. We're setting that to pan sprite. So if you go into the manual and you go to FX layer, filters and effects, and FX types and parameters, you can see that this is all of the different ones. And if we go down to panorama, you can see G panorama texture is what we have to pass the texture to in order to change this 360 background. Basically what I've just done is I've just converted the sprite into something that the struct can access, and then I'm passing it through to that parameter, and then I'm setting the parameters of that layer ID, FX effect1, and the pan sprite, and then it's changing the background. So that took me a while to figure out, but now we can reset the background as many times as we want. Now, what I haven't played around with yet is I haven't played around with the possibility of doing like fully animated 360 videos, mainly because I have no need to do that. But it could be interesting, similar to like the bowling ball puzzle or the ball puzzle in Myst 3, where you can watch the balls kind of like drop in from the background, right? No jokes, please. It'd be interesting to do that. I think what you'd have to do if you wanted to do that is you'd have to, let's see, you'd have to essentially make it you'd have to make a sprite, an animated 4,000 by 2,000 image. So a sprite that contains multiple 4,000 by 2,000 images, compress the hell out of them to make them tiny as you can. And then you would need to prefetch them, and then you'd have to find a way to increment through the sprites. It's an interesting question. I think it would be a pain in the ass, and it would take up a lot of memory. So that would be the main consideration. That would be my consideration. It's like, do I really need this effect? So if you'd like to stay attuned to this project, if you'd like to support the project, you can, of course, follow me on Blue Sky. You can follow me on Instagram. You can follow me to the store and buy me food. Don't follow me to the store, but say hi, I guess. You can follow me on itch.io. That's another place, right, that exists. And if these devlogs are interesting, as I progress, I will do more of them and sort of incorporate answers to questions that you ask in the comments. So thank you so much. I really appreciate your attention, your time, and I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day wherever you are in the world. Take care.